Hey creatives, Karen here, mixed media artist and creative at By the Wolf Moon. Welcome to the next video in the Coming Home to Self series. This one, like the last one, is not what I had planned to have as the next video in the series. However, I go with the flow and provide what I am guided to provide. So this video is all about anxiety, and I've done it a little bit differently. I have filmed the art journal page that I did relating to this, and I'm just going to talk over the top of it so that rather than filming two separate videos. So last Sunday in the early hours of the morning I woke up panicking, and it surprised me because it used to be that I would wake up almost every night panicking and having a huge anxiety attack, but that hasn't happened for a number of years now, or a couple of years at least. I have had some very small panic attacks in the night time over the last couple of years, but nothing like I used to have. And so it kind of surprised me that this came up, and I figured that was as good of a topic as what I had planned on talking about. So and I know that a lot of people do suffer from anxiety and panic attacks, so I kind of wanted to talk to you about that today. So anxiety for me, I don't actually label it anxiety. My daughter has anxiety, real true anxiety, and that's quite different to what I experience. I just generally call them panic attacks because they only happen at night time. I am woken up from sleep with them and my heart is pounding and I'm genuinely terrified. And there's nothing obvious to be terrified about, but it just feels, I just feel absolutely terrified, and like my life is in danger, and that's kind of scary and hard to deal with, especially in the middle of the night when you're by yourself and it's dark and it's not fun. So anyway, when this one happened to me on Sunday, I kind of questioned why it was happening, because life is pretty good for me at the moment. I am fairly calm about everything and coping with everything well. So it kind of made me stop and think for a bit about why this was coming up. One of the reasons was I really feel like I am meant to talk about it. Again, it's one of those things that we don't talk about enough, or if we do talk about it, it's really hard to find people who genuinely understand. So as with the last video, I feel like it's really important for me to talk about this for those of you who do understand and need to feel heard. And as with all my videos, I trust that the people who need to hear them will, and the people who aren't interested or disagree will move on. So back to anxiety. So I was trying to define it the following day. I was trying to figure out what exactly it felt like, and because I knew I had to journal about it and create an art piece about it, and so I needed some sort of starting point, I guess, on what it felt like. So I thought about it for a little while and came to the conclusion that what it feels like for me is, it feels like I am surrounded by a number of like time bombs, and each one is lit, and I have no idea when or where one is going to go off, and that's where the anxiety comes from. It's the panic that sets in, knowing that something bad is going to happen or something is going to explode, but not knowing where or when, and so not being able to prepare for it. And I think that's where a lot of my anxiety comes from. So that's how I wanted to address this in my art journal, which you will see as this video goes along. Sometimes with panic attacks, it used to be for me that once I woke up with one, that would be it. It would take me a number of hours to be able to calm down and come out of that feeling, and often it would last into the next day or the next few days, and it was real. And at my worst, it was a constant. I kind of lived constantly in fear, and that wasn't very fun, obviously. Now that I've got to understand a bit more about myself and why these things happen, or how I think about things, and how that manifests into panic, I can kind of control it much better now. And so when I woke up on Sunday morning panicking and absolutely terrified, I managed to calm myself down fairly quickly, and eventually go back to sleep after a couple of hours. And the next day was pretty tough as well, because I was questioning why this was starting to happen again, and all those things that go on in your head. But it's all over and done with now, and I am not too worried that it'll happen again. So I feel like being able to express the feeling and what it feels like, and putting it down on paper in the form of art was really helpful in releasing all of that for me. I find it more helpful than writing in words, because sometimes it's really hard to put into words what you're feeling, and it's easier to create a piece of art, because art can be abstract. So so I find the art journaling to be more helpful for me. And then once I've got it down on paper, I kind of feel like it's out of me then, and it's there in the book, and I don't need to keep revisiting it in my head, and it's kind of done. So that's why I find this art journaling thing really helpful. One thing I did want to mention to you was that I've said it before, it's not about being an artist, and it's not about me teaching you art and how to technically do certain things. And you'll notice particularly with this one that I actually used an image from a magazine that I had, and that's someone else's piece of art, and I don't want to put that into my art, and call it my art, because it's not necessarily my art. But the point of the project is, and the point of this art journal, is that I am the only one that will see it, and apart from all of you watching here on YouTube, but this is art that's specifically for me, and it was really about just getting it out and onto the paper. So I didn't actually take a lot of care. I didn't do things technically correct. I did things in a way that probably wasn't as good as I normally would, and all of that stuff, because I basically just wanted to get it out and onto the page. So I just wanted to say that to you, in case you're having any doubts about your artistic talents. Please try not to think about that too much, because it's really not about the end result. It's really about what you're putting onto the page, and the intention, and what each part of the page represents for you, and so what the completed work then means to you, and not how good it looks to anyone else. I feel like that's a really important point for everyone to understand if you're undertaking this coming home to self series. It really is just about expressing, being able to express your being able to express yourself. So for this piece, I wanted to include elements that were elements that I feel when I'm in the middle of one of these anxiety attacks, and one of those elements is time. So this bit that I'm doing now is a clock. Time is something that makes me feel a lot of pressure, or that I allow to put pressure on me. I always or constantly feel like I don't have enough time, or I'm running out of time, or there's too much to do and not enough time to do it. We all have those feelings, I'm sure. So time is a big element, and a lot of the work I've done over the last couple of years has been on releasing time and taking that out of the equation, and just allowing life to flow as and when it happens, and not to concentrate too much on the clock or the calendar. And it's really hard, really hard to not allow time to rule your life. And but the least energy you can give it, or the less energy you can give it, the easier and less stressful life becomes. And what I've found is that I never run out of time. I never really run out of time, and nothing bad really happens, if I miss, or if I take too long, or I run a little bit late, or something like that. Nothing really disastrous actually happens. So I just have to keep that in the forefront of my mind. And but time does feel, like an important factor in these panic attacks. So that's why I have wanted to include it in this piece of art. And myself nowadays is that I can only do what I can do with what I have. And I think that's really important for people to remember, is that you can only do what you can do with what you have, and you only know what you know at the time. So it's important not to be too hard on yourself for you know for doing your best with what you have. It's actually important to celebrate what you do with what you have. So that's just something else to remember, or something else that I try and remind myself when I'm feeling like I'm not doing good enough, or I'm not fast enough, or I'm being lazy, or whatever, or feel like I'm being lazy. We can only do what we can do in the situation we're in, and that's enough. As long as our intentions are good, and once we start living from our best intentions, once we figure out what our best intentions are, once we come home to ourselves and realize what our soul really wants to offer the world, then it becomes much easier to live from those intentions. And then it's a matter of just knowing that your best is your best, and that's most certainly good enough. A lot of people who suffer from panic attacks or anxiety are trying to be more than they are. I think they have a strong feeling of not being enough, and a big part of getting past that for me was really commending myself for everything that I do. Really starting to focus on what I do, and not what I'm not doing, or not what I wish I was doing instead. But really taking some time to stop and focus on the things that I do and how important those things are. So, and a lot of that has to do with letting go of the pressure that you put on yourselves of not living up to other people's expectations. So there's a lot of pressure that we can put on ourselves, that we're not um, living up to what other people wish we could be, or think they know we could be. And adding that pressure onto ourselves doesn't actually get us where we want to be any faster. In fact, it's really, really good at stopping us from getting where we want to be. So people telling you that you should be doing this and you should be doing that, actually makes it much harder for us to get out of the place that we're in, that we don't want to be in, because it just adds, a whole lot more on top of us that we have to wade through before we can become who we want to be. You know, if you are trying to help someone who is maybe not in the best frame of mind at the moment, or is really struggling, that encouraging them to focus on the really awesome things that they're already doing, rather than offering advice on what they could also be doing, is probably more helpful. So, for example, um, if it's a mum and she's looking after her, and she has a child, really praising her for how well she looks after her child, or something as simple as that. Or, if they don't have kids, praising someone on how well they eat, or, whatever it is, how well they, you know, um, keep the house tidy, or how, just anything little, how good they are at growing a plant, how good they are at caring for their pets, just whatever tiny little thing it is, really focusing on that instead of adding more pressure by saying, well, you could do this, or you could go and see this person, or, to make your life better. I really feel like stopping and taking a step back and focusing on the things that you already have in your life, that you are doing. Just the mere fact that you are surviving and here every day is something to be commended, because this world is not easy for some people. It really isn't. So, even just commending someone on the fact that they woke up this morning and are still here, is to me priority to telling someone what you think they should be doing. Or, even if you're not talking to someone and you're just doing this for yourself, stop and commend yourself for being here right now, and for taking the next breath, and, for getting through all the shit that you've got through to date. Really stop and commend yourself on that, because it's important. And it's important that you stop and take time to celebrate that part of yourself, rather than just continually focusing on what else you could be doing to get where you want to be, or to get out of the hole you're in, or whatever your situation is. Um, and all of this I'm saying to myself as much as I'm saying it to anyone else, but that's just really what I feel would have been really helpful for me in these situations. Um, of course, the really hard thing is that I generally don't tell anyone else about, you know, when I'm feeling like this, or when I've had a panic attack, or whatever. No one else knows. So I really have to talk to myself and tell myself these things, rather than waiting to hear it from someone else. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to be our own cheerleader. We have to tell ourselves, give ourselves the advice that we want to hear, because often we're not going to hear it from anyone else, because we are the only ones that know what our situation is. Um, so, yeah. I hope that's helpful. Anyway, where are we at with this picture? So I've put a chain around this woman's neck attached to the clock. So that just again represents the effect of the emphasis I put on time, and that effect that has on my anxiety. So that's something I did want to represent in the page. I have turned a few of the circles around the woman's head into ticking time bombs with a lit fuse, because that's how the panic feels for me, and that's kind of where it comes from. And I think I'm just doing some shading and stuff like that now. And really, I'm showing you all of this to kind of give you ideas of how you can express your thoughts and on a page in art if you can't put it into words. So your representation of anxiety might be completely different to what I've done here, and that's perfectly okay. This isn't me telling you this is how you should represent your anxiety in your art journal, and then you'll be fine. It's not like that at all. This is just about me showing you how I represent my feelings and thoughts in my art journal, and just to give you some ideas of how to go about expressing your own thoughts and feelings in your art journal. One of the things that I've noticed is when I can express something on a page, that thing that has been going around and around and around in my head, and really confusing me or frustrating me, or something that I feel strongly emotional about, once I can express it on a page, or even just speaking it out loud, it then becomes much easier to cope with. It then becomes a tangible thing. And I can stop the circle that goes around and around and around and around in my head, because I then have something that I can look at that is tangible, and that makes sense to me. And so that's why, or definitely one of the reasons why, art journaling has been really, really helpful for me in overcoming some of the things in my life that I have had to deal with. And it's why I am basically doing this series, is to also just offering my thoughts as someone who's experienced all these things to other people that may also be feeling these things and not knowing what to do. It's just something. It's just something that's easy enough. It's not expensive. Anyone can do it, and sometimes it's really, really, really helpful. So I am nearly finished with this page now, and actually when I got to this stage of the page, I became really frustrated, and I lost all patience for it, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. But I had to finish it because I had to get it all out. I didn't want anything left over in my head that I would continue to think about, and that's what I find happens if I don't put everything on the page. If I don't get everything out and onto the page, then it hangs around in my head, and it just takes up energy that I could use on something else. So even though I was frustrated and impatient and had had enough, it really wasn't the piece of art that I kind of was intending to create it. I had all those feelings of it not being good enough, and blah blah blah, all those things that we feel. I decided I was going to finish it, but I did rush through it, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it is not completed to the standard that I would normally want it to be completed, because I can always go back at another stage and do another piece of art that that makes me feel better about it. But the point is to get everything out and onto this page, and then it's done, and then I can move on to other things, or I can immediately start another page if I want to, and take the time and know what I want to say or what I want to express on the page. So that was the important bit, is getting it all out and getting it all onto the page, however it manifested. So you'll see this is where I got to, and then I got frustrated and stopped videoing because I thought I was going to stop, and then the finished piece ended up like this with a whole lot of black because I basically just scribbled on it, and that kind of was the frustration and anger coming in right there. So that's the video for today, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will be back soon with another installment. Thanks for watching today.